Guy Smith.
Just before Mr. Guy Smith goes on, Your Honour, with Mr. Haradinaj's consent, I have to absent myself for the remainder of this session for official reasons. I have official duties that I need to attend to later on today. So I simply wanted to mention that to Your Honour, so you didn't consider my absence a discourtesy in any way. Mr. Dixon, of course, will deal with any issues that may arise.
Thank you very much, Mr. Emerson. You had mentioned this before the closing arguments began.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Mr. Guy Smith.
Safe travel. We were embarking on a discussion brief of reasonable doubt. And I think it's important to spend a moment with what is reasonable doubt because of the type and quality of evidence that has been presented to you during this trial. And I appreciate, of course, that Your Honors are well familiar with not only the concept, but the importance of that concept in a criminal trial. So I don't wish to offend, and I won't spend a long time on it. It's been suggested, and I think it's a fair consideration, that it is such a doubt as in serious affairs that concern you, you would heed. That is such a doubt as would cause reasonable men and women to hesitate to act upon it in matters of importance. It is a doubt that is honestly entertained and reasonable in light of the evidence after a fair comparison and careful examination of the entirety of the evidence that's presented to you. Proof beyond reasonable doubt, which always rests with the prosecution, is proof that precludes every reasonable hypothesis except guilt and is inconsistent with any other rational conclusion. That burden of proof that attaches itself to the concept of reasonable doubt, which belongs to the prosecution throughout the trial and never shifts to the accused. And that's important because on occasion, as artful dodger picked the pocket of those on the street, some of the argument that we've heard thus far from the prosecution begins to creep into a suggestion that we are required to prove that we are not guilty. Concomitant with the notion of reasonable doubt is another matter which is important, and that's what we call even-handedness. It's a principle that exists in every jurisdiction, and that's that justice must not only be done, but seen to be done. And that's of particular importance in this case. It's particularly important in the context of where we stand. And has been mentioned earlier, we share the view that this chamber has bent over backwards and has accommodated each and every request made by the prosecution to ensure that they receive a fair trial. Now, depending on what jurisdiction you come from, there are arguments about whether or not that's something that the prosecution is entitled to or not, but that's a matter for an academic discussion as opposed to a discussion here today. But with regard to the issue of ensuring that seeing that justice is done, I think that's one of the issues that is significant in this case. And I think it poses one of the biggest difficulties here. And I'm discussing the issue now in the context of reasonable doubt and in the context of the burden of proof, a category which I would reterm reliability. That is, the reliability of the material upon which you are to pass judgment in order to come to conclusions about guilt according to the necessary standard of proof. And if the standard of proof is going to mean anything in this case, namely, as I've already suggested, that beyond reasonable doubt, it has to be borne in mind that the verdict to be returned is predicated on how reliable is the material that you've been provided with. Because a verdict, which is, if it's to be one of guilt, has to be on a sure foundation. Because if it's anything less than a sure foundation, in fact, the fundamental aspect of a criminal trial is not achieved. And in the category of reliability in this case, there is a duplicity in the way the case itself has been approached and in a way in which the materials have been garnered and culled to put before you. You're the fact finders now. How high is our tolerance for the likelihood of a wrongful conviction? A conviction is unsafe if it's established the fact finder was misled on relevant issue. And I want to take a moment here because I'll introduce witness, as he's been called, X, for a moment. I'll return to him later. But it's been said that the truth to an unscrupulous witness may only be that which is consistent with the prosecution's theory of the case. Let there be no doubt that with regard to witness X, it is our submission that he is either a liar or mentally disturbed, and his evidence is not reliable. A question has been asked by Your Honor, which is, when did they arrive in Jablanica, referring to the allegations contained in count 1. Let me pose a question to Your Honor. I suggest to you, the question is, were they ever at Jablanica? I will return to that, and I will spend some time with that. But the importance for the moment is a concept here. And I'm going to now read from the first trial judgment, and I assure that you will adopt the exact same general cautions. This is paragraph 14. On several occasions, only one witness gave evidence of an incident with which the accused were charged. The appeals chamber has held that the testimony of a single witness on a material fact does not, as a matter of law, require corroboration.
I'm sorry, Mr. Guysmith. So, paragraph 14 of what?
Of the trial judgment in the original trial. On these occasions, the trial chamber exercised particular caution, considering all circumstances relevant to the testimony of the witness, including any possible underlying motives for the witness's testimony and other factors mentioned. So another caution that was given. That's in paragraph 121. The trial chamber has heard much evidence about the tense situation in Kosovo from long before the indictment period, where the Serbian authorities and the Serbian minority in Kosovo, on the one hand, and Kosovar Albanians on the other, as adversaries. This situation calls for caution when determining the authorship of violence against victims of a certain ethnicity or affiliation. Lacking evidence to the contrary, the trial chamber allows for the possibility that animosity among the factions may have caused individuals belonging to one faction to act violently against individuals belonging to the other out of personal anger rather than in a structured...
Slow down.
Thank you, Your Honor. Or organized manner. The predicate, of course, for the prosecution's proposition is that there was a purpose, there was a structure, and an organized manner in which these crimes occurred. I'm going to take a moment now and go back to the assertions that have been made by the prosecution in their brief. Paragraph 18, footnote 58. Tetai heard that members of the Balaj's Black Eagles who wanted to leave the unit or who were expelled from the unit were executed to prevent them from discussing the criminal activities in which the unit had engaged. Tetai did hear this, but his testimony, again, is a bit more expansive. Because he said that the person who told him this, a gentleman by the name of Astrid Berisha, tried to justify his departure from the war zone, the fact that he had left the area, and it caused him concern in terms of believing whether or not the assertion that was made was a true one. Now, one of the major themes in the brief and also in the argument of yesterday by Mr. Rogers concerned the issue of the fearsome reputation of Idriz Balaj and the Black Eagles. It's again, paragraph 18. Tetai testify that Balaj and his Black Eagles were known for their brutality. And this will take a bit more time. But this is the entirety of that discussion, starting at page 3676, P75. Look, this is an answer. I must explain something else. Before Togeri, there was another person, Uku. He was before Togeri, and he left. Togeri came a bit later, and when you asked me about who was interrogated me, there was another person by the name of Uku. And there are many things which we was involved in, and they are now attributed to Togeri. Now we know who Uku is. That's Peter Shala, the man in black with the sword. Question. Were Toger and his men known for their brutality? The witness. He was more dynamic. Togeri was described as such at the time. Everything that was happening, the worst things that were happening there, they were attributed to Togeri, although he may not have been at the site. So there's nothing specific which I've seen with my own eyes. So I'm asking both your honors and the prosecution to ask me about things which I've seen with my own eyes. Judge Ori, could you tell us, you said Togeri was described as such, could you tell us by whom? The witness. In all villages, rumors were spread that it was Togeri who was the source of this and that. But I cannot confirm anything because I haven't seen anything like that. It was being commented on like that. But as to the reality, I don't know. It's true that he was more dynamic and he was more serious in his tone. And that's probably why people reached that conclusion. There was a lot of rumors going around that he did this and he did that. But I have not seen anything and do not know exactly anything of the sort. so I cannot confirm it. Judge Ori, you said he was more dynamic. Could you tell us exactly what you mean by that? He was more enthusiastic. He was cool, but he was by nature and his looks like that. The image that people were talking about, it was something which they had created in their heads. I don't know how. I'd like to ask you about one last matter, and that was the thing I talked to you about a moment ago, that being the issue of Astrid Berisha, which is yesterday. This is once again Judge Ori. You confirmed in speaking to Mr. Ray that you spoke with a young man in Tirana by the name of Astrid Berisha. Yes, yesterday I mentioned him. You explained to us that Astrid Berisha was attempting to justify why he was not in Kosovo fighting, if I understood your testimony correctly. Yes, that's true. You confirmed that Astrid Berisha told you that Toger killed every member of his unit that wanted to leave. That's what Astrid Berisha told you. As far as the withdrawal of FARC from Kosovo is concerned, when this happened, the people's hopes diminished. Therefore, Toger's units and the other units which remained in Dukagjin Plain were weakened, much weakened. They also had a lower morale. So the people who withdrew, they can confirm that he tried to justify why he withdrew. And I didn't think what was said was true. Because if somebody comes to help me, if somebody comes to support me, I will try to do anything to ensure that everybody becomes Black Eagle. So he could not kill anybody. This is illogical. So I could say that he knew I was an officer. I had participated. So he talked to me simply because he was weak. Questioned by the judge again. When you were talking to the investigator from the prosecutor's office about what Astrid Berisha told you, did you explain to them at that time he was trying to justify the reasons he fled the conflict? I don't remember. Also, they didn't insist on asking me this. They asked me simply what I heard and with whom I had contacts. So then one question after another, I came to that, what I said, and that's P75 at page 3813. Now, yesterday, you were told not to believe Ilber Hoskai, because Ilber Hoskai was a friend of Idriz Balaj. Ilber Hoskai is loyal to Idriz Balaj and telephoned him when he was in The Hague. But I'd like for the prosecution to answer this question, or for you to consider it. What is not to be believed from Ilber Hoskai? P40. Ilber Hoskai's statement introduced by the prosecution. Paragraph 8. In the summer of 1998, while I served with the Black Eagles unit Shemshadin Chekai arrived in KLA in my village, Irznic. I'm not sure of the exact date or his position. 9. I came to join the Black Eagles because I had heard that a special elite group was being formed. I was very interested in joining this unit. 10. I joined the Black Eagles on the first day it was formed. As far as I can remember, the Black Eagles were formed on 14 May 1998. A gathering was organized in Irznic where people were invited to join the special unit. A lot of people responded to the invitation. Approximately 500 people attended this first meeting. It was held in a field close to my house in the center of Irznic. Because it was dark, I could not see or recognize the person who led this meeting, so I'm not sure who it was. Of the group of 500 people who turned up at the initial meeting, about 120 actually joined the Black Eagles. I remained a member of the Black Eagles from the date of its inception, that being May 14th, until roughly the end of July. The number of Black Eagles members declined after the first few days, and from then on, there were about 35 members. There was no deputy commander or unit commander, as far as I know. Balaj was the only commander. He was the commander of the Black Eagles from the outset. Is this what you're not supposed to believe? Is this what you're supposed to discount? Or is this what you're supposed to discount? Paragraph 12. The purpose of the formation of the unit was to have a rapid reaction force that would be as highly trained as possible and be ready for any occasion, be it carry out combat activities or help the civilian population. Although we were based in Glodjane, the unit was intended to operate all over the Dukagjin operational zone. In practice, the unit operated mostly in and around the Deccan municipality area. Perhaps it's 14 that we're not supposed to believe. As I noted before, the training in the Black Eagles was very intensive, so a lot of people gave up. I was in good physical condition as I was doing a lot of sports in my youth, and I was very skilled in karate. Maybe it's 15 we're not supposed to believe. Our assignments were given to us orally by Idriz Balaj. Also, whenever a single gun is fired in the Deçan municipality, you could hear it. Therefore, if we heard that Serbian forces attacked the village, we would go there to try to defend it. Is it 19 that we're not to believe? We had a different uniform than the rest of the KLA. It was a black uniform. I was supplied with a special uniform and a weapon at the Black Eagles headquarters a few days after joining the unit. It was a rifle with telescopic sights, like a sniper rifle. I was trained in the use of that weapon. At times, I was also issued with an automatic weapon, or 22. When I left the Black Eagles in the end of July, I was very demoralized. Our unit had for some time been assigned to the villages of Voksh, which if you recall is Zone 5, on the other side of the road, the map that you saw earlier today, Shlup and Drenoch. He goes on and discusses the death of one of his comrades. He was wounded. He says in paragraph 23, after my wound had healed and the Black Eagles had returned from the battlefield in the Voksh area, I told Commander Balaj that I wanted to leave the unit. I told him I did not feel well since the loss of my cousin and other comrades. I've been very close with my cousin, Altin, and I felt his loss deeply. Balaj accepted my decision. Didn't kill Ilber, did he? A young man wounded and demoralized because of the loss of a family member goes to his commander. In difficult circumstances, a special unit, a small unit, a highly trained unit, a necessary unit, and he asks permission to leave. And he's granted such permission. Is that what we're not supposed to believe? Or perhaps what we're not supposed to believe, most importantly, in terms of the assertion made that Balaj executed all of the Black Eagle members, is paragraph 36. Investigator Ole Lettinen has read out to me a list of former members of the Black Eagles, and I'm asked to comment on the ones I know. I won't read you each and every name, but it starts with the letter A and ends with the letter T. The assertion made in the brief, the assertion made concerning Mr. Balaj's brutality and fearsome reputation, at best, is suspect from that evidence presented to you by the prosecution. Prosecution exhibit. Now, during examination of Ilber Hoskai, he was asked the following questions and he gave the following answers. This is page 10336. Mr. Hoskai, you spent a relatively short period of time in training before you went to battle in Voksh, correct? Yes. It was in fact a matter of days before the pressure of the attacks were such that you and members of the Black Eagles, including Mr. Balaj, went to Voksh to perform your duties as a special intervention unit, correct? Answer, yes. When you got to Voksh, you remained in that area. By that I mean Voksh, Drenoch, and Shlup, those particular villages, because that is where the fights were occurring and where you were needed in order to battle. Correct? Yes. He didn't come back to the area of Erznich. And I, once again, recalling P78, which you saw earlier today, Erznich is close to Glodjane, which is subzone 1. Albanica is over here. until sometime in July after you were wounded. True? I only went there once. During the period of time that you were fighting in Voksh, Trnoch, and Shlup in June, throughout July, except for the one time that you said you returned on one occasion, your commander, Idriz Balaj, was there also fighting with you, wasn't he? Answer, yes. After you stopped fighting with the Black Eagles, this is 10-338, you then returned to working with the village guard back in Izhnic. Yes. And were you under the command of Shemshadin Chekai? Yes. I know that he had returned to the village a little earlier. The Black Eagles were still, after your return, they were still out in the field, to your knowledge, were they not? Engaged in fighting in various battles that were occurring throughout the region. True? Yes. And as a matter of fact, as a unit, the Black Eagles were moving in and out of the area after you returned in July, wherever their abilities and services were needed, depending on the battles that were occurring from July until certainly the September offensive. Yes. Now, you indicated in your statement there was no deputy commander or sub-commander, the thing that we read earlier, that I read earlier to you. And Toger was the one who ran the unit. Yes? He was, and I'm using a kind of a term of art here, he was the first in battle and the last out of battle. He was a man who stayed with his soldiers and did not shirk from the responsibility of fighting, did he? That's true. What of this are you not to believe? Predicated upon, if nothing else, the film you saw yesterday of the battles. But to be sure, he is not the only one who is recognized what the Black Eagles and Toger, Idriz Balaj, were engaged in. This is from the testimony of Rustam Tetai, starting at page 3807. You've told us that Togeri was the head of the Black Eagles, which was a group of young men somewhere between 25 or 30. Yes. And you've told us that, as you know, he was involved in actions, and by he, I mean his unit, was involved in actions. That's battles with the Serbs in a number of different villages, right? Yes, I agree with the numbers you mentioned, and they were volunteers who were very daring young people. And there were volunteers who joined Togeri completing this task. They had on black clothes. They were wearing the black clothing, better to say, so they could distinguish themselves from the rest. They had an insignia of KLA on those clothes. If you could tell us whether I'm correct when mentioning the following areas, that these are places where the Black Eagles were involved in battles during the summer of 1998. Voksh, yes. Babaloch, yes. Prilip, yes. Gramatel, yes. Shapte? Shapte, I'm not sure about Shapte. Rastavich, yes. Unik, yes. Karabreg, yes. Shloop, Lochan, Voksh, they're all close to each other. Glodjane? They couldn't. There were other forces there. They didn't need for them to be reinforced in Glodjane. Loja. Loja, you talking about Loja? Yes. You mentioned earlier that the Black Eagles was comprised of a group of daring young men. It was a very small unit compared to the region, and a very, very small group was engaged in the actions, not the whole group. The daring people, the voluntary people who took part here simply did not want to carry black uniforms and attack on one another. And the Black Eagles' responsibility was to come in and, among other things, reinforce the villages when Serbs were attacking, right? Yes. That was its responsibility. In any case of Serbian action, its presence was a cause for pride for the people to see that the unit was there. So the group gave it support. So if there was an attack against a village like Karabreg, Lush, Prilep, people always wanted to have the assistance, support of the Black Eagles. It was moral support. The establishment of this unit was an act of moral support. Question. Apart from being moral support, it was actually, in fact, true military support, because these young men, Toger's unit, had weapons and training that allowed them to effectively fight against the Serb forces. I don't deny this. It's true. Now, one of the things I talked to you briefly about earlier was the fact that Idriz was not from the area. So, as the head of this special unit, a unit that was engaged in heavy fighting, a stranger, there were certain difficulties, potentially. Idriz Balaj was not from the area, was he? Answer. I would like to declare openly I had contacts with Idriz, but I never knew him as Idriz Balaj. He can confirm it himself. I knew him as Toger, and I knew that he did not come from that region. People did not know him in that region, and he also did not know the people of the surrounding villages. Question. Very well. The man that you knew as Toger not coming from the area, this constituted something of a double-edged sword for him, didn't it? And by that I mean he was doing good work, as you've just told us. His unit was supporting and helping people, as you've told us, but he was a stranger in the area in which you come from, where there are a few strangers. That's true. That's true. He came there. He came to defend the villages and the population of that region. And I'd like to thank him for doing that. And possibly also the name of, he gave moral support to the people. And in fact, it was the hope that kept Togeri's unit and the people keeping on. People felt more secure when they were under attack from the Serb forces. Part of the reality question, at the same time, however, was that if there was an effective defense, there would be a greater response by the Serbian army, wouldn't there? It would come in with more guns, soldiers, more tanks. Yes, surely. Our forces grew in number, and as they grew in number and technique, also the Serbian forces grew in number. So a reality on the ground was that when Toger and the Black Eagles were present, there was fighting, there was death, and there was defense. His answer: I would have put it differently. The Serbian forces continued less if the Black Eagle units were engaged. The action was shorter. Whether there is death or other casualties, nobody could really guess what could have happened. In the action he took part, not only Toger, but also other soldiers, nobody thought that he would come back alive. That's how I would put it. That paints somewhat of a different picture. That's evidence it was artfully left out of the prosecution's presentation. Because it doesn't fit with their theory. In paragraph 49, at footnote 171, the prosecution asserts that the victims of the KLA included Serbs as well as ethnic Montenegrins who, like the Serbs, were considered KLA enemies. The first exhibit cited to refers to Shqiptar extremists, not the KLA. It's P149. The second exhibit referred to, P442, the diary of a particular individual at page 6, does not say anything about the KLA. Discusses how people were fleeing their villages, including some Albanians. The next exhibit, P135, does not support the notion of the KLA enemies as asserted. And the last exhibit is Zoran Stojevic's statement, P121, which includes in it paragraph 22, which is in Annex 24, which is not evidence in this trial. Now, if you believe, according to Mr. Rogers, that witness X is telling the truth, according to Mr. Rogers, then you would of necessity convict Idriz Balaj of count 1 and count 6. Before we get to the issue of whether he is telling the truth, let us ask ourselves whether or not he has presented himself as a reliable witness. Is he the type of witness who you would rely upon in conducting your most important affairs? And for the moment, let's forget about the criminal charges against Mr. Balaj and view it in an entirely different fashion. There was testimony that he met with the then president of Kosovo every Friday. As a matter of fact, more often than Friday. He traveled from his home some 80 kilometers through a number of Serbian checkpoints to meet with President Rugova. You believe that? Is that credible? If the issue that you had to decide in this case concerned that testimony, would you believe him? I think not. He testified that the reason that he was having, and I'll put it in a euphemistic term, difficulties with the KLA was because he was going to build a stronger army. Curious proposition. Believe it? Going to rely on him? Mr. Rogers takes the position that we should excuse his failure to be precise, his confused, convoluted, or difficult descriptions about when things happened and when things happened, because of where things happened and when things happened, because of the passage of time. So much time had passed. Okay? 14 years, if I'm not mistaken. This document is under seal concerning information given in 2002, so I assume that we should go into private session.
May the chamber please move into private session.
Your Honors, we are in open session.
Thank you so much, Mr. Registrar. Yes, Mr. Guysmith.
The critical point being made here is that in 2002, there were discussions about the subject matter. That's what the critical point is.
Let me understand. You're not saying what you just read is true, but you're saying it was recorded in 2002. It is different from what is being put in evidence.
Thank you very much. And you, that's exactly what I'm saying, and you, as the fact finders, the judges of whether or not this individual's testimony is reliable, it's something you can consider. And it certainly militates against the notion that this vast passage of time excuses the suggestion that he was inaccurate. But not even more importantly, and in addition to, you recall, Mr. Rogers conceded the point, that he had said in 2006, with regard to the issue of these 3 men, that he had heard they were kidnapped. Not saw, not experienced, not involved with, but heard. Quite distinct from his testimony some 6 years later. And hearing and seeing, as we all know, are real different. Because when he claimed in his testimony to have seen, he involved himself in the incident. He did this same kind of thing on a number of different occasions. This is why I suggest to you that he is either a liar or mentally unstable. Because there is no one to confirm his story concerning this abduction, as it is called, this kidnap, as it is called. The evidence on this point is that on the 19th of May, these 3 individuals were seen leaving their village. They were seen at the village where this abduction, as it is claimed, took place. And they have not been seen ever again, but for witness X's assertion. There is no one else, no one, who claims that the kidnap, as it is called, or, and most importantly, the incident that occurred in Jablanica, in which it is claimed that Idriz Balaj cut off somebody's ear, ever happened. You have to believe witness 3. You have to find witness 3 a reliable witness in order for that to hold any water. And what's curious is, considering the kinds of rumors, or considering, I'm sorry, I said witness 3 and I meant witness X, and I apologize. Considering the types of rumors and considering the profound incident itself, doesn't it strike you curious, strange, that no one but Mr. X claims any information about this? No one. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. We did hear from another witness. We did. I'm sorry. I apologize. I don't wish to misspeak. We know what the quality of that witness's evidence is, and we know what Mr. Rogers' position about that evidence is, and that witness is. He's asked you to discount in its entirety anything that that man said. Now, it's easy to accuse somebody. And if you make it a particularly heinous crime, and you add on to it a bad reputation, well, not real hard to make a determination from those two speculative assertions that the individual accused is guilty. After all, he's a bad guy. That's what's being said to you. We avoid, in its entirety, doing it that way, the inconsistencies internal of his testimony.
Before I forget,
Wait,
you look like...
sorry, hold on. I'm with you.
Before I forget, it looks like you're going to the next point. Can I just ask something from you?
Sure.
At page 86, from line 18, you say, but not even more importantly, in addition to, you recall Mr. Rogers considered the point that he had said in 2006 with regard to the issue of these three men that he had heard. Are you able to give us a reference, please?
A reference?
Where Mr. Rogers accepted and considered this?
Yes.
Or where he's supposed to have said in 2006 that he had heard, whatever.
Well, there are two different issues. One is, when did the witness testify to it? And I'll get that for you. I'll give you a transcript reference for that. And the second is Mr. Rogers conceding the point yesterday, which I'll also get, which I will, if you want, I'll also get your transcript reference for you.
I see he nods his head that he did concede it yesterday. Or am I wrong, Mr. Rogers?
No, I did say yesterday in the course of my opening, my closing, that the witness had said he had heard they had been taken from the mill, but that he had seen them in the place. And he said that during the course of his testimony.
Thank you.
Do you want me to get you a specific reference at this point, or?
If you may, please, if you have them, I'll appreciate them.
I'll get it for you.
Thank you, Mr. Highsmith. You may proceed. I don't want to delay you.
Thank you. It's page 2597 of the proceedings.
Thank you so much.
Now, Well, 2598 is specifically even more specific, because that's when a question is asked by Judge Malotto, did you say that sentence? And his answer is, yes, sir, yes. So,
Thank you.
sure. We stop in a few minutes, do we not? Okay. Yesterday, Mr. Rogers, I think, misapprehended at least an argument that's been made on behalf of Mr. Balaj, which is that a suggestion of collusion between witness 3 and X. So there's no doubt. As far as we're concerned, there was no collusion between those two people. What happened was X stole the life experiences of witness 3 and said they were his own to give credence to his falsities, in the same fashion that X shifted from hearing to seeing. And I will pick up tomorrow with that part of the discussion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gasmith. That brings us to the end of the session for the day. We obviously haven't finished. We had been set to finish today. I suspect we can only postpone to tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Same
We
court
start tomorrow morning?
Morning, 9 o'clock, same courtroom. We'll ask that CMSS makes the necessary arrangements. Court adjourned.
Very well.
All rise. Vive le lever.